Yeah, boom. Yeah, that's right. It just happened. It just happened right there on the watch. How's everybody doing? 7:10. I'm a little bit late, but I had to gather everything together. It's amazing how dirty and dusty and sawdusty and spiderwebby and all kinds of things that you get working on the tree fort. Tree fort's coming along. So those of you that have been following this channel for a long time, the OG guys, will know that I did a lot of videos from, not live ones, but we did the intros and stuff for videos from the tree fort, and it was pretty cool. I built a tree fort back at our other house for my boys, and so they could play on it. And then I ended up using it a lot because it's a great, like, backdrop and prop for using all this stuff. Plus, I think every house should have a tree fort. I think it's a good thing. This one is a little bit more elaborate than the other one. And, we learn as we go. And just like project cars, we make them bigger and better and faster and all that. And so we're going to do a lot of things on this one that we didn't do on the other ones. And they'll be used more for Lisa's family. A lot of her brothers and sisters have young kids and stuff. And so they'll get to come over and play at Auntie Lisa's house and have, we're going to have like little water cannons and stuff that they could shoot at things with. And then we'll have a electric elevator, and then a little ramp for the dogs and everything. And it's kind of a 2-story deal right now. So it'll be cool. I think that they'll like it. I'm going to make a little rope swing and a slide and stuff. And so it'll have, some fun accoutrement. But what we're talking about today is not it's not the tree fort, although it is awesome. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of all days working on that thing, because there's so much stuff. Just like with everything, there's so much more that you have to do in terms of measuring and figuring it out. And because this isn't a tree fort that I went online and found some design for and I'm copying it. It's just me, just off the top of my head, just free forming it. But that makes it better though, because it's the way that I want it. But tonight we want to talk about I was talking to Jimmy today, and he's got the Rotrek supercharger on and ready to go. So hopefully we'll have dynos stuff tomorrow for that. Right now it's non-intercooled, so it'd be cool. I'm thinking about doing a little maybe a giveaway, but where we're guessing power or we're guessing boost or something like that. So I'll try to come up with something. But I'm excited about that. But we get comments from, if you go to the store, richardholdenerperformance.com, we got the cams and the turbos for sale, injectors, lifters, all that stuff. So go there and support that's how you support what I'm doing here, is with that store and selling those products. But we get a lot of comments and stuff. And one of the comments I thought was very interesting. And I love it when people make these comments, because it gives me things to talk about. And it helps me basically educate the public out there, because if one person is thinking this, it's more than likely that lots and lots of people are thinking it. So we want to talk a little bit about piston to valve clearance, and then also about dynamic compression and the unwarranted concerns about our camshafts with regards to either one of those. So the person wrote back and said, "Oh yeah, I was looking at the low buck truck camshaft, and it has a really tight LSA, and that concerns me." We're like, okay, what about it concerns you? And he was saying that the tight LSA is going to have because of the tight LSA, it's going to have a lot of dynamic compression. I don't know what a lot is, but it's going to have some. It's going to have more, whatever the thing is. It's going to have more dynamic compression. And then that's going to make it detonate on 87 octane. I'm like, really? Okay, well, there's some things to discuss there. Some things to be talked about. We gotta talk it through. There's a lot going on there. And unfortunately, just like with a comment or an email or whatever, you don't know really what the person's thinking or what they're asking. They ask a question, but a lot of times their motivation means that they're asking something else. And you got a lot of things going on. First of all, in fact, this is going to be our poll. So this will kind of get us started. Okay, if you increase dynamic compression ratio, do you always increase power? So basically, if you you know, if you're doing your calculations on the dynamic compression ratio calculator.com, Wallace Racing, I'm sure has that. I've never used that particular one. But if you do increase the dynamic compression, do you increase power? So his thinking is that because he's been, I'm sure, is on with the other people that are dynamic compression ratio people, and he's talking with them, and they're saying, hey, you can only have this number, this magic number of dynamic compression before it detonates. And first of all, that's nonsense. So not that there isn't a correlation between excessive dynamic compression and detonation threshold. There can be, but there can also be a detonation threshold based on static compression. There can also be a detonation threshold based on timing, also based on air temperature, also based on water temperature, also based on the combustion chamber design, also based on, you know, there are so many things that would affect this. And unfortunately, for a lot of guys that are there, especially if they're new to this and don't have a good understanding, like you go to the people that are talking about dynamic compression and you go there not knowing about all of these other things and not having a good baseline like education on an internal combustion engine, you go there and these people tell you, hey, look, you can't run more than 8.5 to 1 or 9 to 1 dynamic compression or 10 to 1 or whatever their magic number is. You can't do that. Well, actually, you can. People do it all the time. They go past this number. And the way that they go past this number is you take timing out of it. You put a camshaft in it, like you put a camshaft in it that makes all the power in the world. That you know has all these magic valve events. It makes lots of power. There would be a lot of things to talk about when we're talking about dynamic compression, because my question is, where does it add power? If you have a dynamic compression ratio that's 8 to 1 and you make it 8.5 to 1 or 9 to 1, does it add power, first of all, universally? And where does it add power? Does it add it in what we would consider, like, does it add torque in the danger zone, which is where detonation is more likely than not going to occur, at or below the torque peak? Because if it adds power at the horsepower peak, stuff's happening really fast there. And so the susceptibility to detonation is very, very low up there at the horsepower peak. You can get it if you work at it. You can get detonation there, just like you can get it anywhere else. You can get it with too much timing, and you can get it at the top of the RPM range with too much timing. But that's not dynamic compression. And so, you know, here's the thing. This is just like, you know, if we add boost to a motor, are we adding dynamic compression? I would argue that a similar thing is occurring, and yet we can change what would effectively be the dynamic compression with boost beyond the numbers that they're talking about and not have detonation, because for a lot of reasons. Basically, we retune around this. And here's the other thing to think about this when we're talking about this is, if you have a completely stock motor, let's say we have a Tahoe or a Suburban or Silverado like I have, or Tahoe like Jimmy has, and you have a stock cam in it, and the motor's all stock ECU, stock air intake, stock intake manifold, stock exhaust, everything is stock, and it has whatever dynamic compression ratio that stock motor came with from the factory that GM designed. And yet, if you put 87 octane in it, you cannot run full timing in that. That's not because of dynamic compression. It's because you don't have enough octane. So the dynamic compression isn't stopping you from being able to do something. The octane is stopping you from being able to do something. It's stopping you from even running a stock cam, which makes some given power curve, let alone if you were to put like one of our low buck truck camshafts in it, that definitely adds power, and it definitely adds power down low and at the torque peak and at the horsepower peak, adds it almost everywhere. Maybe not at 1,000 RPM or 600 off idle like people want us to test. Maybe not there, but a lot of other places. So the question is, where would the change in dynamic compression ratio make the thing want to detonate? And then, if it did, would it want to detonate more than the stock one did at the same temperatures and all that? And then, could you control that by taking timing away, like the factory does, when your motor is running too hot and your air temperature is too hot, and you're trying to run 87 or less octane in it? It's taking countermeasures to stop that sort of foolishness. Again, it's not the dynamic compression. And his, just really quickly, his other concern seemed to be that it had a tight LSA, so he's worried about piston to valve clearance. And again, while those things, there might be a correlation there, it's not a causal thing. If you tighten up the LSA or add duration on the intake side, you change piston to valve clearance. But just because it has a tight LSA on a 212 intake camshaft, we are a mile away from any sort of piston to valve clearance issue with that camshaft. You're not going to get there. You can mill the head, you know, 100,000s, not that much probably, but there's a mile of piston to valve clearance there, and you don't have to worry about it. But so he's getting, you know, I'm assuming that he doesn't have a good background on all of this stuff, and that he's going to somewhere and getting information, and then he's coming and asking us about it, which is the right thing to do. I want him to do that. I want him to come and say, hey, look, what about this? You should come do that. But if somebody else told you that that's going to be a problem, they gave you bad information, because that's not going to be a thing. Also, if you're trying to get maximum power out of 87 octane, there are other things that I would do, because all of these things that you're going to do, especially things that are going to enhance torque production at the torque peak or below the torque peak, you're probably going to have to adjust you're going to take away some of that gain, because you're going to have to take timing out of it, because it won't tolerate that. We're working on something that will help you tolerate that, but that's another discussion for another day. So let's see. If you increase dynamic compression ratio, do you always increase power? 53% saying no. Maybe recognizing the word always in there and being a little skittish about the word always. Scotch, what's going on? Talking about air today. Yep. What's going on? I still go back and watch the old videos of you outside. Yeah, I love the tree fort. It was awesome. I made it 4x8, mostly because that's what 4x8 sheets came in, of the plywood stuff that I was using. But it was a little narrow, so 8x8 seems like a better thing. What's a good jump up, but still mannered? About what? 5.7 LS1, currently a hair under 390 wheel horsepower. Okay. What did you do to it? What are these XP points everyone has? Never mind, I see it. A comment thing. Yeah. They're wearing little crowns. When you're done with the tree fort, it'd be cool to get a tour. Oh, of the fort? Yeah, I could do that. The thing is, it looks like, I'm guessing that the way that this is going to go, because it started out as, you know, it always starts out with, oh, I'm just going to change my radiator cap, and pretty soon it's a complete rebuild. But, you know, the more that I look at stuff and look up stuff and sit there and go, I have to do this and then this and this and this, and I can't sleep at night because I haven't done the things I want to do. And if there's more things to get done, I could easily go do them, but it's the middle of the night and my neighbors will get mad if I have the saw working and all that, and the impact and all that stuff. But the cool thing is I got to use a lot of cool tools. I got to use a sledgehammer, which is awesome. I got to use my 1/2-inch drive Milwaukee impact, because I have basically big studs that I'm driving into the tree to secure everything, to secure portions of it anyway. So I got to use the impact for that, which is great. Got to use all of the other Milwaukees, the drill and the impact driver, which is like a little 3/8 thing. So that's working good, because before I put, a lot of the stuff is held together by 3/8 bolts and washers and all that stuff. So that's the main stuff. So the main supports are that, but there's a lot of, 3-inch number 9 like wood screws But before any of those go in, they all get drilled. So it's a drill and then a drill and a fill, kind of thing. So it's a lot of stuff. And then there's a lot of, it's not just a nice, oh, I'm going to put this many beams in and this many beams going this way and then put plywood over it. It's never that easy. It's not like that at all. Intake valve timing affects dynamic compression more than LSA. I feel like I hounded you all the time about a poll, but now I rarely find time to watch. Sorry, Larry. It's all good. Minnesota's checking in. What's going on? What is the max duration for piston to valve on an LM7 706? Somewhere in the mid 230s at 50 on the intake. But again, your LSA will also have an effect there. Dynamic compression depends on intake valve closing, which will change with LSA and intake center line. I haven't reached this class yet, but soon. My next course is electrical fundamentals. Good. Then you can help me with stuff because I'm going to wire that thing for lighting too. It's going to have water run up to it. It'll have lighting, maybe a disco ball for some music and stuff. I want to start modifying on the LY6 engine. What mods do you recommend to start with? Well, an LY6 already has a displacement. It already has really good cylinder heads. It already has a really good intake manifold. So a cam and springs would normally be the first thing. Charge timing, less fuel, prone to detonation. Cylinder head design makes a huge difference in detonation. Yeah, the chamber design. When I'm done with my head and cam swap on my LS1 and have a bass tune, how long should I let it idle and start up, and how long before I really mash the pedal while driving? Are you breaking in the motor? Bass tune is something to get the engine running so you can work on the real tune. Yeah, you don't. A bass tune is a starting place, and it's not going to tune itself at even under closed loop. All it's going to do is make adjustments to air fuel, and then they're not going to have long-term trims. And I don't know where you're going to be at wide open throttle, because a lot of times the idle tune and the ability to start and stuff has little to no effect at wide open throttle. It's not just an inexperienced person getting caught up in this. The main Mopar engine shop here had to be forced to give me 9.5 to 1 compression because they swore that more than 8.5 will detonate. And a lot of times for that thing in particular, for Mopar stuff, is especially older guys will go by things like they may have a lot of experience on Mopars and 440s and 383s, 400s, 318s, 360s, whatever. And they experience that because the way that Mopar lowered the compression was they brought the pistons down the hole, which is not great for curing detonation. It's good up to a point. And maybe if you get it down far enough, like you get it 100 or 200 thousandths down, then it really doesn't matter. But that's not a great way to do it. And so they experienced this detonation with iron heads and a carburetor and having the piston in that particular spot with that kind of design. Maybe they experienced that. And so now for them, everything is just that. Okay, if we went beyond 8 and 1, we got detonation, and maybe they did. But, things are different. Always just a keyword. Yep. Richard, I got a 4.8 LR4. Nice. Running a twin turbo setup. Can't figure out which turbos to run for a quick spool. Power levels 500 to 1,000. Well, your spool rate is going to, because you want 1,000 horsepower, you're going to trade spool rate for twins. 1,000 wheel horsepower, the 3584s would certainly do that, but a single 42 would be better. But you could go with something smaller then. You could go with 3076s probably on a 4.8 and still get 1,000 wheel horsepower. Cam header stall, LS6 intake, current. Best of 12.3, 223, 230. And it makes more than 400 at the tire. What did it make stock? What cam would be a good jump off, but keeping its manners? I really want to see at least 1190. You can't get that. You're already at the point where you're trading. So if you're at a 223 cam, and you want 4/10, I don't know that you're going to get that with a cam. I don't know what heads you have, but you're at a point where could definitely benefit from heads. Would Holly split intake be worth it over a dual plane on my L33 with a sloppy stage 2 cam? It will definitely make more power at the top, but it's going to lose a lot down low. What cam do you recommend for an LY6 that will give a great all-around game without sacrificing idle quality? So take a look at the 6-liter stuff that we did. I have lots of videos up on 6-liter performance. In fact, it's my most popular cam, or my most popular video. It's the one that's gone over 1 million views. It's the only one so far. There's another one I think is in the 900s right now. But I ran a bunch of different camshafts on them. So anywhere from an LS3 cam, a sloppy stage 2. I've run a bunch of cams in there. So if you want still a decent idle quality, you're gonna have to pick a smallish kind of cam, and you're not going to gain a ton of power with it. About a 97 454, has factory 410 gears. Nice, that's good. That all sounds like good stuff. Factory 410s, dually 4L80E, 3500. I was looking up today for my truck. I was looking up upgrading the front brakes to the GMT 900 stuff. Lube separation duration should not have any effect on valve to piston clearance. With piston at TDC, 80,000 valve to piston has always worked for me. Lobe separation and duration don't have any effect on piston to valve clearance. Gotta go back and watch some of the videos. As stock 241 heads, yeah, there are a lot better heads to put on there. When is it necessary to upgrade the springs? Whenever you do a cam upgrade. The exception to that is there are some cams that are like, there are NSR cams. So Brian Tooley has, for instance, an NSR Truck Norris cam, which is a 500 lift version. And so you can run that with stock springs. There are lots of cams like our cam, our low buck truck camshaft, or a regular Truck Norris cam from Brian Tooley that you can run with the stock 550 lift springs, which came on the LY6 heads, the LS3 heads, some of the 243 and 799 heads, the LS2 stuff. But those factory 550 lift springs, stock springs, you can use with lots of cams. Otherwise, when you do a camshaft upgrade, normally they have springs for it. My Turbo E46 doesn't have an intercooler right now. I've seen intake temps over 80 degrees C. I'm acquiring parts for an air water intercooler. That seems like a lot. I'm not real good on conversions to Celsius to Fahrenheit. I don't have a good feel for that right now. Maybe I should do that. Maybe I should spend a couple of days and figure that out. But that seems like a lot. Hello from Field Camp in Alaska. Nice. My father, who passed away several months ago now, used to spend a lot of time in Alaska. They used to go do a lot of fishing up there. Got a heads cam intake LS6, blown up LS1 replacement, and my 01 Camaro fired up last break. BTR stage 3 NA cam. That should be a good cam for that. When in doubt, just get a low buck truck. Yeah, the low buck truck cams sell very well. If you're turbine limited for max power, would you expect a major cylinder head upgrade to do anything? If you're at the limit of your turbo, I wouldn't expect a cylinder head to be a cure for that. 243s going on. Those will be better. Ported ones would be even better. Ported 241s flow 307. Yeah, you can port any of the factory heads and make them flow a lot. Like 307, that's a good number. You can get that kind of flow. I've seen from really good guys get more than 300 CFM from those kinds of heads, from any of them. So you port any of them. You can port the 241s, you can port the 243s, you can port the 706s. Most guys do bigger valves also in the 706s, but ADC is 176. Okay. So with porting, all of them can work. Without porting, a cathedral port on an LS1, which is what you'd run, a 243 or a 799 would be your best bet. You could mill them a little bit, but porting them would definitely help. And then you could also, you could put a bigger camshaft in it. You're going to start to trade stuff though. You could go with, you know, a 230 kind of cam, 230 plus. How's our poll doing? 56% saying no. Yeah, I did. Yeah, they told me that they hadn't eaten in weeks. Dogs. They lie all the time. It's been forever since you fed me. It's not really been that long. It's not time for you to eat. Gapless rings. No, I don't want information on a triathlon. That's not going to be me. What the heck is... Oh, that's why. What the heck is going on? Okay, so here's somebody who wants... Can you do a video on a 351 V6? That would be kind of cool, right? Or the bigger one, right? Don't they make a... Doesn't GM make a bigger one than that also? Good evening. I like that. Valve train deflection will always mess with piston to valve clearance checks. Got any cool custom tools to account for it? Not to account for a dynamic number. I don't know how you could, unless you had. I don't know how you could calculate frequency and stuff. You could just add a certain amount. Truck buddy's always starving with a full bowl, drooling over my steaks. I have a 4.8 Gen 4 motor on my Silverado. I want good low lift stage 2 BTR cam kit. What do you recommend? That wouldn't be the cam that I would recommend for a 4.8. I would recommend like a Truck Norris NSR cam maybe for that. I have videos up where we ran that. Unless you want something that idles better than that. We have the Little Ripper cam might be a good option for that 4.8. It's kind of stage 2 truckish, you know, about that sort of spec. Not the place to have a discussion about valve events and piston to valve clearance. Would love to be able to talk to you about this. 5 minutes. May change 60 years of theory. Can I call you? What is it that you want to talk about? What is it? Are you looking to change my mind about something? Because if you are, I'd like to know what it is. This actually is the place to have a discussion about this. That's why I have these live feeds. With the topic being piston to valve clearance, 241 mil 25 thousandths, 202 157, and TA porting needed the pistons notch to run my stage 3 cam. Do you need that, or are you telling me that you did need that? The stage 3 cam doesn't seem very big. On the L33, we ran factory flat tops with the BTR stage 4 LS3 cam and milled the 799 heads 30 thousandths, and it works. I don't know how much it works by. It might be 1 or 2 thousandths. Airflow velocity versus volume would be a good discussion. The airflow velocity versus volume of what? The plenum? Because that's going to be not a good discussion. Watch your Big Bang video for a Gen 3 and a 6-liter. I was stunned by how the engines were able to handle that much power. The stock bottom end. What changes you suggest for half the power? Nothing. You can just put ring gap in it, and you can make, we had a lot of those motors had 70, 80, 90 runs at like 1,000 horsepower. And they're a lot, and it's not something I did that's magical. That all came from other guys out there already doing it in drag racing. So there are guys out running it at that kind of power level and running, multiple seasons without having any problems. As long as the tune is right, there's enough strength in the stock bottom end to go do that. Is there a line where porting cost versus an aftermarket head cross on a budget? You would need to do some research on that. You'd need to see what porting costs, like go to Total Engine Airflow and see what you sending heads in, or the guys at K-Tech or the guys at Texas Speed or any of those, and see what it costs for you to send your heads in. Maybe they'll just do a swap. Maybe they already have some that are done. And see what that costs, and then see what a comparable set of Trick Flow 215 or 225 heads cost, or any of the other PRCs or any of the other heads that you can just buy that are already ported. And then you can see for yourself what the cost difference is. I mean, is there any part of the engine you recommend strengthening? We didn't do any of that. I didn't do anything to the bottom end on the Big Bang motors. All we did was clean them basically and put ring gap in them and freed up the pistons and stuff. Stock rod bolts, stock main bolts, all of that. We did put head studs in it and put new gaskets in it. You're played around with automation, the car and engine manufacturer design game, and some really thorough engine and physics sim stuff that's pretty neat. I haven't. And for now, I like your Mighty Mouse build a couple years ago. Yeah, we did a lot of stuff on the little 4.8. That's what my setup needed. I forgot to mention 1.8 roller rockers, pistons kiss valves without a head gasket, so I notched the pistons 11. Okay. How can valve timing affect piston to valve clearance? 80,000 clearance with piston at TDC will never change. You don't run into a piston to valve interference problem at TDC. That's not where the interference happens. Try to decide what would be better for my build. Low buck truck or BTR stage 2 turbo cam for my trucks. Simple rundown. LQ4, Gen 4, forged pistons, Trailblazer SS 799, 4L80, 4-wheel drive, Circle D. Come on, man. Richard, can I run a turbo on a stock 5.3 LM7 and safely make 400 horsepower? Have you seen the video on our stock 5.7 Tahoe that is driving around? And have you seen the videos where I've run 650 horsepower on stock ones? So yeah, the answer is yes. Just got my engine from the junkyard and popped it in my BMW. Yeah, but you could also just put a cam in and it would make 400 horsepower. Use two different sized turbos and a twin turbo. This gets asked a lot. Small one to get the power at the lower end, a big one to get the power at the top end. Do you think it will work? No, it won't. The only way to make that work is if you have to isolate the turbos. You have to isolate both the exhaust side and the compressor side of those turbos, because the one that spools up first will backfeed the other turbo. It will backfeed the bigger turbo. And then if the big turbo ever gets going, it's going to backfeed the smaller turbo. That's why they have Sequential turbos, where you turn off essentially the smaller turbo. Lower dynamic compression ratio will require more timing before top dead center to build cylinder pressure versus a higher dynamic compression ratio that might need 20 degrees before top dead center to build cylinder pressure. I think you're confusing things here with timing and dynamic compression. Because what I can tell you from 30 years of experience dyno testing is a stock cam and a low buck truck cam and a stage 3 or stage 4 BTR LS3 camshaft, they all want exactly the same timing. They all make best power with 30 degrees of total timing. So this thing where you're talking about dynamic compression and cylinder pressure and all that stuff, if you have the octane, this is what will happen. They will all want the same timing curve. If you don't have the octane, then you have to adjust things based on where detonation is occurring. How good is a lemon honey tea for lunch? I'm not a tea drinker, although the spike teas are pretty good. I have, but this is a high mileage. How can the valve hit the piston if there's always 80 thousandths? The piston can never get any closer to the piston. You know, you realize that the valve goes down past the TDC, right? I've been trying more or less to build a 4.8 similar to the Mighty Mouse low lift cam, NA stage 2-ish again. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the best cam choice would be. That cam that we use worked, but on a 4.8, I usually don't go. I think if I remember right, was that cam a 265 comp cam? I think it's probably was. I was using a whole bunch of those back then. It will work, but a truck Norris cam is a lot better than those camshafts if you wanted to do that, or our low buck truck camshaft. It will make a lot more average power. So in theory, you can make a custom tool to apply actual spring pressure to the rocker to remove up to 40 thousandths of deflection from the valve train. 720 now. Yeah, but the problem is that it's not that simple. It's not specifically 40 thousandths. And when is it 40 thousandths? Because this is a frequency problem. It's not just a deflection problem. The deflection doesn't happen as soon as you start the motor that it has 40 thousandths worth of deflection at every RPM, because that's not the way that it works. Wish we had Richard's engine principles as an elective class. I was watching older lives. How's the banner coming from the background? We're working on that. Talk about perfect timing, as you said, although I got a Hungry Jack's ad that started with how good is a Whopper. Hey, that's all good. Whoppers are good. Rocker arm ratio speeds a valve up and can make it hit as well as a lobe intensity. Yeah, there's lots going on there. If Gary, if I'm telling you that it changes it, it does. I'm not giving you my opinion about it. I'm giving you facts. Take a look at the video where I showed you what was happening dynamically as we were spinning the motor over, because I cut away part of the cylinder head and part of the block so you could see in there what the valve is doing. I did it mostly so that we could see that the valve is hitting the edge on LS3 heads, but also you could see the valve comes down past that and doesn't hit it at TDC. It hits it at about 10 degrees before or after TDC. That's the area where you need to test it at. The cutaway demonstration was a good one. Yeah, it was a lot of work cutting that stuff up, but still kind of cool. I kind of thought that video would have like 1 million views just because it was kind of a cool cutaway. Get the trick flow cylinder heads. Good stuff. I see two kinds. What's the difference between the twisted wedge and the high port? Well, they're completely different kinds of heads. One's a inline valve wedge head. The high port is. The twisted wedge is an altered valve position. What kind of power are you trying to make, and what's the rest of the combination? The Truck Norris, would it still be a simple cam kit? Yeah, it is. It's cam and springs basically, and that one might also have or our low buck truck, which is going to be a lot less than that. It's going to be way less, probably half of that. But with our low buck truck or the Truck Norris, you don't have to change the it's a simple single spring, and you don't have to change the seals or anything. Ford 302, 360 horsepower build. You don't need a high port head. A twisted wedge would be a better choice, and then a ported twisted wedge would be even better, or an Airflow Research 165 or 185. The Power Nation or one of those had a really good post on social media about the cam bearings, which we've been trying to tell people for years and years now, is that the reason that you're seeing that the cam bearings be the way that they are is because the OEM has honed them. That's how they hone it for the cam. They put the bearings in first, and then they clearance it for the cam. They don't do it the other way around. Just a wedge is like a Cleveland head. Not a Cleveland, because doesn't have side cant and stuff. It's just oriented, just rotated, basically. Just twisted. Your vehicle may benefit from converter regardless of the cam, from what I've read. Yeah, a converter usually is a good help. Do you set piston valve clearance with the cam on base circle or at maximum lift? Guess things are different with an old small block Chevy. The way that I set piston to valve clearance is I mock up everything, and I use a test spring, and I put it at 0 lash, and then I spin the motor around and get to the areas that are most critical. Like I said, I do it for a long ways because I like to, oh, look, there's a mile there. Oh, now we're getting close. And then we move it into the area where it gets closest, and I move it back and forth until I get at the closest spot. And then you can set up a dial indicator and measure it. I can do it by feel. I can go, oh, that's 100. That's a lot. That's a ton. And so, but if I move it and I go, I think that's 30. Then I set up the fixture and go, I need to see if that's 30 or 31 or 22 or whatever it is. I haven't had BK in a long time. And I do that on small block Chevy, small block Ford. I do them all the same way. You just have to take all the lash out of it, and you can't do it normally with a hydraulic roller lifter. So we make it into a solid. I haven't had BK in a long time. Duration is what you need to worry about, not lift. Yep, that's true. The lift at maximum lift, the piston's already way down in the hole. By the time the valve is all the way open, the piston's pretty far down the hole. So you normally don't have to worry about that. It changes the speed at which it does that. So there's a little bit of concern, but the duration hanging it open for the long time is really what causes the problem. So we're 50-50 right now. 50-50. What would you consider safe dynamic compression? I don't do that. I don't work by dynamic compression. I don't have a feel for that at all, because I've never even measured it and never even correlated it with anything that we run. We can run full timing on the engine dyno on 91, which is normally what we run. We can run full timing on that. I've never done a comparison where we've run some sort of dynamic compression, because I don't do that. We put the cam in and know what the cam does. Been using clay dial indicators for a long time. Yeah, that works good too. You can I've seen lots of guys do clay, and then you slice it and kind of see what it is. Yeah, I don't think that dynamic compression determines detonation. I think a lot of other things do. I think it's one of the myriad of variables that do that. Because even with an 8-to-1 or 7.5-to-1, I can still make it detonate. I can add enough timing where it will detonate. And especially if you're running it at 200 degrees or 230 degrees. Motorcycle engine, but engine would timing too advanced cause lean condition. Think it might be intake leak otherwise. Carb. I would be more worried about excessive timing causing detonation than I would be about it leaning out. If it's carbureted, especially if you're throwing off the system by having too much timing in it, and the system is relying on that signal to draw the fuel in, maybe there could be something there. But when we alter timing on a fuel injected motor, and not under closed loop, so it's self-adjusting, it's under open loop. When we change timing, the airfield doesn't really change very much. So we can go from 25 to 27 or 20 to the tune that doesn't require me adding more fuel. We all have a love-hate relationship with intake valves, always in the way for port and not closed fast enough to get out of the way of the pistons. Yeah, it can be problematic. Let's see. Factory 5, 302, Edelbrock performer heads. Near. We did a video using those Amazon, eBay sheet metal intake manifolds. Yes, we've tested them many, many times. Lots of different people sell them. Appreciate always want to learn, having trouble knowing how to ask Google the right questions. Yeah, being able to, even in searches, even before Google and stuff, or even before AI, let's say, but finding the information a lot of times is asking the right question. If you don't know how to phrase a search, it comes up with all sorts of weird stuff. I only see AFR swings when at idle and torque management pulls timing. It dips to say 8 degrees for a moment on a Gen 5 torque based stuff. Yeah, you can have other things being adjusted there. What's the best intake for an LY6? There's no best intake. So take a look at the LS3 intake manifold test, and it will give you a really good idea. The LY6 intake manifold is very, very good. You'll be hard pressed to pick something that's better than that, short of the performance design intake manifold, which is a little bit better everywhere. Any intake manifold that makes big gains compared to that will lose power down low. So you have to trade stuff off. That's not a good deal. I have not used ACES fuel injection. Got an L3 top end with dual springs for 350. Nice. Long as they're in good shape and the seats are not coming out. I guess that's not really a problem with LS3 heads though. Not really a problemo. Testing. You're a smart guy. Should look at a dyno graph and pick the part that has the power where you want it for the best. Well, that's the thing. You want obviously a different camshaft for a daily driver, truck, towing that never sees more than 5,500 RPM. If you have a Camaro that's your a manual trans, 4 series gears, you're buzzing to 7,000, that camshaft, even if the motors were the same size, that camshaft is going to be different. Also, very well, the intake manifolds could be different for those too. The low buck truck cam for my 4.8. Plan on using a 2,500, 2,800 stall. That'll be good. Do I need to change out 342 gears? No racing here. I wouldn't worry about it. Gears will definitely help, but I'm assuming that you have a 4L60 or something behind that. So I have, and I don't know what tire size you have, but I think my truck has 4 series gears in it because it's got a tow package on it. And it cruises like at 2,000 at 70 miles an hour or something on the freeway, so it does good. Will I have piston and valve clearance problems if I put them on an LQ9? Well, if you put what on an LQ9? What's ring gap recommended for boosting the LY6? Well, the LY6 is the one that we made 1,540 horsepower with. And so we put ring gap between 28 and 30 thousandths on that. Spoke of a truck Norris camshaft earlier. Have you done testing on a Gen 5.7 Hemi with that cam? No, I haven't run the truck Norris cam on a Hemi. Brian definitely has, and they have dyno results on that. 2070 is great. My Land Cruiser is 3,060. Yeah, Land Cruiser does have, it's got gear in it. The 823 heads. You don't have problems on a you won't have piston valve clearance problems on 823 heads on an LQ9. You have the same piston to valve clearance on an LQ4 that has a dish piston as you do on an LQ9, because the valve hits the edge of the piston and the dish piston has a ring around it where the valve is going to hit. So it doesn't matter that it has a dish in the middle, because that's not where the clearance is. The problem is. Always found 8.5 to 9.5 dynamic compression works with 93 octane. Yeah, again, I don't know what your water temperature is. I don't know what your tune is. I don't know how much timing you've taken away. The cranking compression tells me nothing about that. I'd love to put the H152 fifth gear in it. I dropped to 2060, which really helps. Yeah, that would be good. And it depends on what you're doing. I don't think a lot of guys are trying to get good fuel mileage with that. What was the first car engine setup that you rode in that got you hooked on hot rodding? My first car was a Camaro. It was a split bumper Rally Sport. My brother had a Firebird I rode in before that. And then before that, we rode in, I had a friend that has passed away since, but he had a Volkswagen Rabbit that had no AC, which was tough here because it gets 100, gets to be 100. So we just turned the fan on. And when my buddy and I both got Camaros, he's like, I don't care. My Rabbit gets great mileage and has a great pickup. And I actually still remember having the conversations with him about that. Trying to think what else I rode in that would have been cool back then. I think all of the fast stuff I rode in was after I got my car. I remember riding in, which made me not want to ride in boats anymore, because it was when I was young. I rode in it's probably a 17 or 18 foot V drive with, I think it was an L88 in it, and it went like 95, and it was not. And it just had the forward facing seats and the rear facing seats that are back to back. And so I was like 10 years old or whatever, riding in the back of that thing. It had open pipes and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, this is not my thing. Do high flow cats drop horsepower compared to what? Did you get into engines and dynos? Yeah, I told the story of going to school for advertising, which I have a degree in, but I went to the Silver State race because I bought my Mustang to go. I've always been a road racer, so I bought my Mustang to go road racing, and I did that. I did a lot of SCCA stuff because I like racing. But went to the Silver State race, and somebody did a story, and then I talked to the editor, publisher of it, and asked him about the story. He said, "Well, here, take a look at this," and I ended up rewriting it, and the rest is history. Or on P2V, I want L33 with ported and milled 799 heads and a truck plus cam. Any worry or no? I don't think so with a truck plus. I'd have to go back and look and see if we've run the truck plus. No, you won't have a problem with milled heads on that. Not if we've run the milled heads and we have the LS3 stage 4 cam in it. So that's not an issue. Although we didn't run that cam with 799 heads though. But we did run it with the milled trick flow heads. So no, that's not gonna be a problem. Land Cruiser gets 10 miles per gallon. Yeah. Is your Land Cruiser a 6-cylinder? Is it like a big 4-liter 6-cylinder or something? If you increase dynamic compression ratio, do you always increase power? We flipped. We flipped to 53% saying yes. And 47% saying no. We're going to end our poll there. I'm building LQ4 706 heads for a Jeep. Looking for a smooth idle cam that will squeeze the most low-end torque out of this combination. What would you suggest? Well, if you want a stock idle, it's going to have to be one of the stock cams. And the stock cam that makes the most low-speed power, and I don't know what your definition of low speed is the stock cam, is a stock Elm 7 camshaft. So if you want power at 1,500 RPM or wherever you want it at, that would be the best one. If you're more realistic about where you'd be running the motor when it's actually running, because nobody's going to be loading a thing at 1,500 RPM, then the low buck truck camshaft, but it's not going to have the idle I think that you want, then you should get the little Ripper cam. Favorite engine of all time? I don't have one. It's always the next one that I'm testing. I know you did a bunch of testing on a 4.8. Do you have data comparing the same fast intake cam and heads between the 6-liter and the 4.8? How much did the cubes change the peak horsepower? Oh, you want to know where it made peak power at? I don't think I ever ran those the 245 heads on a 6-liter. I don't think. I have to go back and look. And on the 408, we ran a bigger cam that I could run in a 6-liter unless it had valve release in it. So it wouldn't be the right combination. When you guys are testing the LSLT hybrid and modified the L86 intake for port injection, do you know what rail was used on it? I don't. I'd have to talk to the BTR guys and ask them. 100 Series 2UZ manual, which is fun, but I'd trade it for a 105 1FC because then I get a solid front axle. For what it's worth, my favorite engine of all time is a Merlin V12. That's a good choice. Flat tops on my 5.3, 799 heads, milled 5,000s. Truck plus cam, no piston valve issues. Yeah. Milled, is that 50,000s? I've never seen anybody mill stock heads 50,000s and then still have the intake fit. How much horsepower and torque does a Ripper cam make? If you go to richardholdenerperformance.com, the dyno graphs are there. And there's a comparison between the Ripper cam and the low buck truck camshaft. But it's about 50, I think, over stock. I have 243 heads on my 4.8 Anything besides a port and polish for them? You could mill them, which that motor needs, because a 4.8 could help. It could help it make more torque. Got 1 more minute. Freaking my camera out. I'll see if I have. I probably have like a 6-liter or a 6.2 and then a stroker version of that with the same stuff on it. I probably have that somewhere. I'm certain that I do. What's your favorite piston company? I don't have favorites, really. I've tested all of them. And if we can make 1,500 horsepower in stock pistons, all of the other aftermarket pistons are going to be better than that. 50 thousandths milled is tight, but it fits. But do the ports line up or anything? What trend, if you remember, that affects long tubes had on an engine? A Land Cruiser has long tubes on it with leaking gaskets. What effect do long tubes have? They usually add power everywhere over stock cast short exhaust manifolds. We don't normally go more than 30 thousandths on a factory head because then you have problems with the thing lining up. Do you sell it, or you mean the data only is on the website? No, we have a store where I sell cams and turbos and springs and lifters and all sorts of things that you would need for your performance LS. On there is that camshaft, and then we have that camshaft, but where if you go to that camshaft and you can look at the specs and everything, you can also look at the dyno curve because it's there. And you go to richardholdnerperformance.com. Besides the truck Norris, what cam would get me near 500 horsepower with just a cam kit and a stage 2 trans? A truck Norris is not going to get you near 500 horsepower. Not with a 5.3. Who makes custom pistons with molds of combustion chambers that can be sent out? Most piston manufacturers will do that if you have to do a custom one. Octane, spark timing, and cylinder pressure affect detonation. Dynamic compression affects cylinder pressure. So then, by extrapolation, dynamic compression affects detonation? Yeah, 500 horsepower on a 5.3 takes everything. Takes heads, cam, intake. Best to do it on a flat top L5.3 if you can. We've done it with the other ones, but it's easier. A 4.8, yeah, 4.8 is not going to make 500 horsepower unless you have boost. What we had to do to the 4.8 to get it to be 475 was really, really good ported heads, a fast intake manifold, a big throttle body, long tube headers, that cam was only 224, so something more might have got us a little bit closer. But it takes everything. It takes all that stuff. And it's not something you want to drive around because it's pretty soft down low. $20,000. Yeah, I've done 30, but I don't think I've ever done 50. Seems like a lot. I'd start to be worried about the deck thickness of the head. But on that note, it is time to go. But as always, I'll be back, tomorrow, as always. So don't worry.